It's going to be a lively fall with probably some upsets that none of us can even dare to think about right now. Well, joining us is the man who is called America's most listened to radio talk show host. He's heard on 240 stations across the country. He's become the darling of the conservative movement and the nemesis of those on the other side of the fence. He originates his program from WABC in New York City, and it's a pleasure to welcome to the 700 Club, Rush Limbaugh. Rush, good to have you with us.
Hey, Pat, this is a distinct honor and a pleasure for me. It's a thrill to be with you, and I thank you for the invitation.
Rush, you just, it's hard to say you came out of nowhere, but you just suddenly have become a national phenomenon, a very popular show. How come?
Well, I tell you, Pat, there are a lot of reasons for it, but, you know, one thing about coming out of nowhere, I've been at this 17 years struggling to get at it, and, of course, just because I'm not a networker and I've never spent a lot of time getting to know people in the radio or the broadcasting business, so few people know who I am, but I've been out there. But I think one of the real reasons for the success of the show is the perception, and as you know, in politics, perception is oftentimes reality, the perception by real people that the primary disseminators of information in this country are shall we say, slanted to the left. Yeah. And here comes the first, and it's really the only national program on radio or TV that has a conservative bias to it, admittedly so, that they can latch onto. And I never thought that would be the reason. I thought for my success I was going to have to be a better broadcaster and sharper and faster and quicker, more informed and all that. I didn't bank on the fact that so much of the success would rely on the fact that I happen to be very fortunate in my timing. I think this country is far more conservative than even people think it is now. I travel the country every weekend making personal appearances and speeches. I see the people who make the country work, and I think that I happen to benefit today from having a lot in common with most Americans.
Right. What are those Americans telling you? You are hearing as much as anybody the voice of the people because they call you and you're meeting them. What are they saying?
Well, it's a combination of things. You know, I think we're in the midst of a culture war right now, Pat, and the piece that you just had spells out the conundrum that exists for the voter today. We're in the midst of the reshaping and redefinition of the limits on our behavior. Who's going to set those limits? Who's got the right to set those limits? What the punishment for violating them is going to be. I mean, there used to be this implied agreement in America that everybody had their freedom, do what you want to do, just keep it to yourself. And that gave us what a lot of people call the establishment or the mainstream and a bunch of little subcultures. And the subcultures now who have been out there and been pretty private are all upset at having to be private, and they want to become public. And there clearly is a battle being waged for the American public and its mind and the American voter, both as a collective and as an individual. And I get fascinated to watch all this stuff shake down. Pat, the best way I can tell you what's happening is that for the first time since the early 70s, I think, those who are the believers in the traditional American values but who never show up until it's election day unless there is a bona fide leader like Reagan to make them feel okay to express their true thoughts. He's gone now, so again, we're back to the old silent majority days. These people are very much concerned about some of the values and the moral issues and the issues that are symbolized by the flag and by the NEA. And what's happening is these people are beginning to fight back. Obscenity in Florida now all of a sudden not being tolerated. Your ad that you ran in USA Today and the Washington Post was fascinating to me because I said, now this is interesting. Will this get a response? And it did. You've been called Hitler, you've been called Stalin-like, you've been called McCarthy-like. But look at what the NEA just did, Pat. The National Endowment for the Arts just rejected 4 so-called grants, just rejected them for controversial porn art. So it's working. I think the people of America who are shocked and a little bit repulsed at what they see, the counterculture rising up, ought to have great faith and great hope because there's plenty of evidence that people are willing to fight back and win.
What about fighting back? I mean, the flag amendment didn't pass. There are 177 congressmen who said no way to an amendment. We don't know what the NEA vote. That's coming up in just a few days now. What do you think will happen at the polls? Is that silent majority going to go out and actually dump some congressmen this fall?
Well, see, that's the conundrum that I referred to earlier. I'm dumbfounded. I mean, you would think that as many people oppose the pay raise would vote out their public official. On the one hand, they vote for them in what, it's a 98% incumbency return rate, and then the same bunch of people who can't wait to reelect these same people are dead set against these people getting any more money. I don't know that in congressional elections it matters. You know, if you ever could nationalize House elections, you might get a different turnout in the House, or if this limitation of terms thing ever really happens. But so often what happens in a local district has nothing to do with what a congressman's going to do as far as his national impact is concerned, and most of them campaign on local issues. Who brought the most money back for nursing homes, for water projects, what have you. It's really a tough thing. The Republican Party is the majority party, and if you're a good, decent Republican man or woman, you want to serve your country, what is there in it for you to win an election to the House of Representatives? You're in a minority. You're never going to get a plum committee assignment. It's a major problem that the Republicans face. Well, and I think this is going to be interesting to see this November just how this goes. I think it's tough to call because there is frustration. But there's also arrogance on the part of congressmen. This flag business is proof. They don't think they'll suffer from it. Bush doesn't think he'll suffer from or be harmed by his flip-flop on taxes.
Well, Russia, you know, the thing with the guys in Washington, they vote one way and they cover it up when they get home and talk another way, and apparently the, quote, liberal media lets them get away with it. But the question is, are you and others going to hold their feet to the fire enough so the public will really get mad and identify the people and the issues?
Well, I think, you know, there you're asking a question that I'm sure you've had to ask yourself, and right. That is, as a participating member in the media, which you and I both are, do we also want to become activists? And I think it gets to just what you view your role as a member of the media to be, and why your success is accruing, why mine's accruing, and you don't want to do anything to upset that, yet you've got to remain true to your convictions. I mean, it's very unpopular today, very unfashionable to be pro-life. If you're pro-life today, you're a woman hater and a murderer. I mean, there's so little tolerance. And Pat, there's a new fascism out there that I think springing up. Yes. And it is reminiscent of this no tolerance. If, for example, you don't say the right things about an issue, it's not enough that they just turn you off or not listen to you. They want to try to get you banned. They want to get you so that you can't speak. And I have had that happen to me. I've actually been shouted down just because of what I think. And it's a very sobering thing, and it gives, when it happens to you, new respect for the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and so forth. And that experience was hosting the Pat Sajak Show, really has had a reshaping and a redefinition of the purpose of my life and what opportunity I have now. So I think that the spirit of the public is to fight back and to be heard. And I think that in the absence of such a powerful figure as Ronald Reagan, it's going to take a coalition of conservative leaders rather than just one, but I think it can be done. And I, for one, intend to, any chance I get, hold somebody's feet to the fire if I find a little hypocrisy.
Rush, you're in a medium, we both are, that are pretty much dominated by those who would be considered liberal on the political spectrum. Right. Are these people respectful of your point of view, or do they try to put you down and put you off?
Well, who specifically do you mean?
Well, why don't you? So some of your fellows, obviously, you're on ABC, so somebody must like you in the higher levels of broadcasting.
Well, you know what it is. One of the things I'm very fortunate. I am in partnership. I own a percentage of my show, and I'm in partnership with one man who used to run the ABC radio networks. His name is Ed McLaughlin, and we just use ABC for distribution, but we're not part of them. We're not paid by them. They handle our sales and so forth. But the bottom line is the bottom line. As long as it's making money and it's not irresponsibly controversial, then nobody's going to have a problem with it. But in terms of respect, that would go back to what you say at the top of the show. I don't think I get any, but I'm not striving for it yet. I'm only up 2 years now on this national show. But people are still trying to figure out who I am. And so until they figure that out, there's always going to be this little curiosity. But one thing, Pat, and I'm sure this has happened to you, I mean, you know you ran for president. All you have to do is be a mainstream conservative. Immediately you're an extremist, you're a fanatic, you're a kook, you're a freak. And if you're not careful, you end up defending yourself against those kinds of charges. And that's what I try to avoid. And I think the best way to avoid it is to try to not cast yourself as a controversial figure by virtue of your behavior in the way you conduct a program, but simply by let the substance of a discussion of the issues determine whether or not you're controversial. That's what I'm trying to stick to.
Well, you've done a great job, but listen, I want to congratulate you on the success and on what you're saying and doing, and I'd like to say keep up the good work, and I hope you have another 200 stations added to the network very soon.
Well, Pat, with help from people like you, it probably will happen. I've got to ask you a question, though.
Yeah.
At the Oliver North Roast, I emceed, and you were slated to go third as a roaster, and we moved you up to the front so that you could catch a plane. Did you ever catch your plane and get out of there in time that night?
I really did. I ran for the airport. The plane, if you can believe it was a private plane, he was already taxiing down the runway to get out of National Airport, and we called him back. True story.
Oh, really?
I made him, yeah. I made
Terrific.
I made the plane. But
They have a law in Washington, folks. You can't take off after 10 o'clock down there, and it was passed so that you wouldn't wake up congressmen. Which, you know, it seems to me, let them take them a minute, wake them up. It's what we need.
Either wake them up or get them out of town.
Right.
Rush, thank you again, and we'll be talking to you soon, I hope.
Pat, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
If you want to get rid of Congress, you know how to do it? Forget budget negotiations and forget tax increases and just let the Graham-Rudman cuts happen. The law's in place, let it happen. Everybody will be so mad they'll vote for anybody but an incumbent. Let it happen.
And the lights go off in Washington at the same time.
That's right.
Rush Limbaugh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat, very much.